Hey guys, Justin Nelson here, owner of Sphere Rocket Virtual Assistants, and today I wanted to give you 5 red flags that you should be looking out for if you're out there hiring your own virtual assistants without using a matchmaking company like us. All right, guys, and so in today's video, I'm going to go through the top red flags that my recruiters / matchmakers look for when they're vetting candidates for our thousands of clients on any given month, and things that you should be looking for if you're not using a company like ours. So these are just a few of the red flags. There's probably a list of 20 plus that my team is trying to identify during each call to get people either kind of vetted on as a pass or, put back as, a non-vet / fail. But we're going to go through a few today. I'm going to go one by one. I want to make sure I get them perfectly correct. So I got my phone right here and I'm going to go one by one. I just want to make sure that these are the most 5 important things that you need to be looking out for. So some of them are going to seem really silly and really small. They have a lasting impact on the hire that you choose. So the very first one that I'm going to talk about is the reluctancy to get on camera, right? So if you're communicating back and forth, you're using a source to find your virtual assistant, like an online jobs PH or remote Latinos. Links are in the bio if you guys ever need to check out those sites. Number one, you're going back and forth. The VA candidate schedules a time. They even jump on Zoom or Google Meet with you to do their interview, but they do not get on camera. I don't really think I need to explain this one too much, but I want to explain it a little bit just in the context of the Philippines. In the context of the Philippines, a lot of times we have what we call job gatherers. These are virtual assistants that have great corporate background, they have great resumes, they have great everything, and they're willing to go onto these sites and put together this awesome resume, this awesome appearance, and then they try and get the jobs for other people, and those people will jump on the interviews, but they don't have any of the experience that you can't match it to who they are, and so a lot of times they won't jump on camera, right? They're scared. And it's not only always about lying or deception. A lot of times the person's just really timid. They're shy. And, when I'm hiring for a role, I need someone that's willing to jump on camera with me every day, smile with me, just like if they're my best friend. I get to know them and we get to do business together. So number one red flag should be pretty straightforward, but it's really, really important, even when thousands of miles away, is that they have a reluctancy to jump on camera. Number 2 is when I'm looking at something called a resume, or more importantly, in the Philippines, they call it a CV, is I want to really drill down into what their past experience was. So if I'm talking to a freelancer that is doing a whole bunch of freelance jobs, obviously that might be a little bit different than if I'm talking to, a more BPO experience virtual assistant that has a background in corporate world where, you might see their resume / CV and it has, 3 to 4 jobs over the last 10 to 15 years. That's going to be considered pretty stable, right? Versus someone that gives me a CV / resume that has 5 jobs in, 3 years. I'm like, so you've only averaged 5 to 6 months at the job, and maybe that's all you need. But a lot of us, we're looking for a little bit more stability long term in our hires. And so not that there's anything wrong with any certain length of time. Some of my best hires ever had jumped around for a bit until they found their right place with us. But what I'm looking for as a red flag is their lack of ability to tell me why they were there that long, why it didn't last that long, and more importantly, kind of why that's a trend, right? A lot of times they have clear-cut answers. They're like, because of this, or because the ethics of the company, or, I had a child, so I had to quit work for a bit, and now I'm coming back. I had a spouse or a mom or a son, or a daughter that got sick, right? So I'm looking for answers, even if it's just like, man, I'll just be honest with you. I'm a free spirit and I love to jump around. Like, that's a totally truthful answer. So the red flag is me catching someone up in their lack of ability to tell me about their history. Even if they had a stable history of 5 jobs over 15 years, if they can't explain what they did in those roles or, the impact they made, it kind of is a little bit of a red flag for me. They're not able to connect to their work that they had done for so long. Number 3 thing, which is a red flag, and guys, there's all different kinds of rules and compliance depending on how you're hiring them, whether it's a contractor, through an EOR, as an employee. So this rule kind of, red flag depends on what you're doing. But a lot of times we see virtual assistants when they will come on and put out a resume and try and apply for a job, they'll say things like, I won't use Screenshot Monitor. I won't use a time tracker. I won't use this. I won't use that. I won't do that. Now, while freelancers, independent contractors, and things like that a lot of times don't have to use those types of things because it's more of a on their own time and they're just depending on how you set it up. One of the red flags for me is when they so explicitly say, I won't do this, I won't do that, I won't do that. It's either because of 2 things. Number 1, they've been burned really bad in the past and I feel sorry for them, but now you can tell they really have their guard up and they're always going to be really skeptical of you as a business owner. Or number 2, they're going to try and game the system, and it's hard to game the system if you're using these these accountability systems, depending on what they are, a contractor, an employee, etc. Like, it's hard to game the system if you require them to be on Zoom all day. It's hard to game the system if they have to be on screenshot monitoring all day. And so, I just want you to kind of put those red flags out there. Is a lot of times some of the best freelancers in the world and best virtual assistants in the world, they make amazing money because they can work for what I call 10 dumb Americans at the same time, because you guys are so unorganized and you are so, and I was there, I say you, but it was me as well when I first got started. The VA might be able to work for 10 people from 8 to noon, and the people are just not very smart, and they don't realize the VA is so good at what they do, they can actually manage that for 10 different people at the same time zone at the same time. And they can blame things on delay of messages, like, oh, sorry, I was just going to the bathroom or whatever. And like, they are able to make a ton of money. But in my opinion, that's a little bit dishonest, quite a bit dishonest, if they're not upfront with you, right? A lot of times there are positions where you're like, you might be hiring a VA for 5 hours a week. So it's like, yeah, like, no duh, they have to go have 5-10 other jobs to have a full hours a week. But I really, really am looking for that. So red flag number 3 is they don't want an accountability system. And guys, a lot of times this red flag appears after you hire them, right? They say all the good things on the interview, you hire them, you guys get synced up, you get a little bit into training, and they'll come to you kind of like this. They'll be all nervous. They'll be like, hey, I just want to know, like, I know I agreed to do this, but I don't want to do it anymore because of XYZ. And they usually try to come up with a really good reason. Guys, what they did is they just kind of hoodwinked you. They just got the job, and now they're trying to backtrack something so that way they can go work all the other ones. And again, there's nothing wrong with them working other jobs. They're a human being. You can't tell them they can't work other jobs, but you definitely can have the expectation of complete concentration while on the time that they're working with you. So that kind of leads us into number 4, is they can't answer what they were paid in past roles. Now, again, a lot of times that's none of your business, but a lot of times it's really important because VAs will a lot of times come overshooting, right? And so people ask me all the time, Justin, what's an ethical wage? What's the minimum wage? Because a lot of the cities, the minimum wage is $1.50, give or take a few cents here and there, depending on where you live. So the ethical minimum wage is usually around that $1 to $1.50, depending on where you live, what industry you're in. Again, it's a little bit different in the contractor context between nations, but if you're looking at Philippine corporations and what they're required by minimum wage law to pay, usually between about $1 to $1.50, depending on where you live. So with that being said, when you pay someone $3, $4, $5, $6 an hour, that can be considered 3, 4, 5x minimum wage, which is considered a great living. When you go to the country and you talk to someone earning $4, $5, $6 an hour, you're going to hear that they're at the upper echelon of most areas that they live on. But what you're going to find with a lot of virtual assistants is you're going to have them come and apply for your job and say, I'm worth $12 to $16 an hour. Now, this isn't to say that they're not, right? They very well could be worth $12 to $16 an hour. The problem you're going to find is, as you're going through these resumes, you're going to have a hard time figuring out, have they been paid that in the past, or is that just what they're telling me that they're charging right now, right? If I have a virtual assistant that says they're worth $12 an hour, but their last 3 jobs all paid them $6 an hour, not really sure why they just jumped it from 6 to 12, right? It's not that they may not be worth that, but I don't have a track record to show that they ever achieved a level of work to earn $12 an hour, right? I know for me, I kind of have a knowledge with my team of thousands of placements and the hundreds on my own personal team. I can tell you that VA is asking for $10, $12, $16 an hour. That is an absolute premium, right? And again, many people are worth that premium, but I think a lot of times, the people that aren't worth that premium make a bad name for virtual assistants that don't work out because they charge that premium. They're not worth that premium. And then the client on this side doesn't have a premium experience for what they're paying. And again, it's not because it's still a lower dollar amount in the US to pay $10 to $12 an hour, but because that's considered such a premium in the Philippines, you should be expecting a higher level of worker. So red flag number 4 is they're unwilling to tell you kind of what they generally got paid, how their compensation structure was structured in the past, especially if they're in the same role. We see this all the time with like cold callers or, salespeople. Like, it's like, well, if you want $8 an hour here, what did you make in your last role? What did you make after commissions? Things like that. That'll be a big tail sign of, just their overall comfort with you on the call. All right. Now, number 5, this one's a little tricky because, again, a lot of you guys, if you're doing this hiring on your own and you don't have the consulting on our side to help you weed through this, if you're hiring someone full time, I really dig deep on if they're working for other people. Because again, guys, these are human beings. You can't tell them that they can't have second jobs. Just like my employees in the United States, I can't tell them that they can't go waitress at night, that they can't go bartend at night, that they can't have a side hustle. I can't tell them that. That'd be illegal to tell them they can't do that. But what I can do is I can get a greater understanding of what's going on in their life. Because if I have an employee that's coming to work from 8 to 5, and then they're bartending from 5 to midnight, and then they're cleaning, janitorial services from midnight to 3 a.m., and they're only sleeping from 3:30 to 6 a.m. before they come into work, I'm obviously going to see that they're not very productive at work because they're so exhausted, they're beating their body. And so kind of same thing with the Philippines. Like, I want to make sure that I understand the full picture. If I'm hiring someone for 30, 40 hours a week, I want to know, do they have other things that they're doing on the side? If so, how many hours of that? How long have they been doing that? How consistent is that? And that's not even for me just being nosy or for selfish reasons. I want, as a human, to know, are they overextending themselves, right? I found this with my wife and I, even here in the United States. A lot of times we'll work ourselves to the brink just because we're trying to check another level. I just want to make sure that people I'm hiring aren't, working 2 full-time jobs, 80 hours a week, and obviously we know from studies that that's going to burn them out. And that's something that's a red flag, because if you're hiring them for 40 hours a week, and they're working another 40 hours, you're going to feel that other 40 hours of them being distracted, them being burnt out, so on. So those are the top 5 red flags. Like I said, there's 20 plus other red flags that, an experienced matchmaking service like ours is looking for in an interview. But those, for the most part, are the most critical 5 red flags that if you can spot, it at least allows you to get to the next interview a little faster. Or if you do proceed with a candidate and they have some of those red flags, you at least can kind of know in the back of your mind, like, hey, I was warned a little bit about this. So again, guys, those are the top 5 red flags. If you want to hire someone like us to do the vetting and matchmaking for you, and we're able to spot 20, 25, 30 red flags many times that our team uses on criteria, there's a link down below to schedule a call with our team, and we're happy to do all that for you. But at the same time, I want to make sure for those out there that aren't quite ready to use a service like ours, that you guys know exactly what to do when trying to find your own virtual assistant to give you the best chance of success.